Before we start this episode, I'd first like to shout out Agatha Things, who suggested this episode of Derby Profile, so thanks man, I appreciate it, and if you have any suggestions, please don't be afraid to comment them down below. Seeing comments under my videos and what people have to say is always a huge pleasure, and honestly one of my favorite parts of having a YouTube channel, so if you got a comment, say something. Anyways, now time for the episode. Another day, another Derby Profile. Today's episode will be on Zandon. Let's go. First up, we'll cover his stats. Zandon is a rather lightly raced colt. He's only had 4 starts, 2 victories, 1 second, and 1 third, but in that time, he's managed $713,000, so he ain't no slouch, and he's been making the most of those starts. When it comes to those major races that he's had, he was 2nd in the Remsen, 3rd in the Risen Star Stakes, and most importantly of all, he won the Grade 1 Bluegrass Stakes, which not only sealed his place in the Kentucky Derby, but also put him as one of the Kentucky Derby favorites. For how he runs his races, he is a little different than some of the other horses we've covered in previous episodes, as he is a closer. He comes from the back, he takes all the trouble and all the traffic, and still salvages a victory. Although he can be closer to the pace as a stalker, as shown in the Remsen Stakes, but he generally prefers to stay at the back and show off his best running late. And despite coming from the back and saving his best speed for last, he's definitely not slow. The Bluegrass Stakes gave him a 107 speed figure, which ties him with Messier for the fastest speed figure going into the Kentucky Derby, which is definitely a significant improvement over the speed figures of his 3 previous races, which were all 93s. So going into the Kentucky Derby, he seems to be putting his best foot forward. But let's get more into that. It's time for the strengths and weaknesses of Zandon. First up, strengths. Speed figure-wise, he is tied with being the fastest horse going into this Kentucky Derby. He is going into the Kentucky Derby with his career best performance, which does somewhat nullify some of his weaknesses that we'll be talking about later. In all of his career races, he had to deal with traffic, and despite having to lose momentum at least once in every single one of his races, he was still able to quickly recuperate and finish no worse than 3rd. But you can also have this be perceived as a weakness, as you could say Zandon is an unlucky horse, with not a super clean trip in any of his races. Yes, it's impressive to see what he's able to do with all this trouble, but it's not exactly great to have your horse constantly held back by a running style that fundamentally requires the horse to work harder than, say, a front runner. And in the Kentucky Derby, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So while he is used to bad luck, being able to navigate 20 horses from the back is going to be no easy task. In fact, closers are rather unpopular in the Kentucky Derby when it comes to winners. Sure, we've seen in recent years quite a few closing horses make up good ground to get 2nd or 3rd, but in the last 8 years, the horses that crossed the wire first in the Kentucky Derby all were no further away from the lead than 3rd place. So, in recent years, closing hasn't been very favorable to winning the Kentucky Derby. But maybe this year will change. We'll have to find out. For now, Zandon is a very tough and resilient horse that is coming into his own with his best performance being his most recent start. And for that, I will give Zandon an A- grade. He seems like the kind of horse that would pick up the pieces. But that concludes it for this episode of Derby Profile. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Comment down what horses I should cover in the next episode of Derby Profile. And see you guys next time.